For 9 years, Counting Cars was one of the most watched shows on the History Channel. Muscle cars, custom choppers, a crew of characters who felt like your loud, grease-stained family. And at the center of all of it, one man with dark sunglasses, a bandana, and a voice like a big block V8. Then, without warning, it was gone. No final episode, no farewell season, no announcement from the network, just silence. And the question every fan was left asking was the same one nobody could fully answer: what happened? The truth is more complicated than most people realize, and it starts long before the cameras ever showed up. Danny Koker wasn't born into the spotlight. He was born in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1964, into a family that ran on two things: motors and music. His father, Daniel Koker, was a musician who performed with some seriously well-known gospel acts, including the Foggy River Boys and groups associated with names like Mahalia Jackson. Music was in the walls of that house, but cars were in Danny's blood from the moment he could hold a wrench. Several members of the Koker family worked for Ford Motor Company in Detroit, and growing up around that gave Danny an obsession with mechanical things that no classroom could have taught him. He was a self-taught mechanic, entirely self-taught, and by the time he was a teenager, he was already tearing down and rebuilding engines on his own. The family eventually made their way to Las Vegas, and that's where everything changed. His parents became part owners of a local Vegas television station, KFBT Channel 33, and Danny stepped in front of a camera for the first time. He hosted a weekly horror movie showcase called Saturday Fright at the Movies, playing a character named Count Cool Rider. Picture an Elvis-obsessed vampire in a cape introducing B-grade horror films to the people of Las Vegas. It sounds ridiculous. It also worked. The crowds loved it, the character stuck, and somewhere in those late nights on local TV, Danny Koker became the Count. He didn't know it yet, but that nickname was going to follow him for the rest of his life. Count's Customs didn't start as a business. It started as a garage. Danny's personal space for working on his own collection of hot rods and motorcycles, occasionally letting friends bring their cars by. But word spreads when someone has a genuine gift, and slowly, other car enthusiasts started showing up. What started as a hobby turned into a legitimate operation, and by the time Count's Customs had a real reputation in Las Vegas, it was doing serious custom work on serious machines. Muscle cars, choppers, one-of-a-kind builds that people drove from across the country to have done. That reputation caught the attention of Rick Harrison. Yes, that Rick Harrison, the man behind Pawn Stars. The two became close, and Danny started making appearances on Pawn Stars as the go-to expert whenever a rare vehicle came through the pawn shop doors. He appeared on the show 21 times between 2010 and 2013. Every time he showed up, the response from viewers was the same. They wanted more of this guy. History Channel was watching those numbers closely. By 2012, they had a decision to make, and they made it. Counting Cars was greenlit as the third spin-off of the Pawn Stars franchise. The show launched in August 2012, and it hit immediately. There was something genuinely magnetic about it, not just the cars, though the cars were spectacular, but the people. Kevin Mack, Danny's best friend and the shop's business manager, was the voice of reason in a place where reason went to die. Ryan Evans, the lead painter, could turn a blank panel into a masterpiece. Shannon Akow ran the bike side of the operation with a builder's precision. Horny Mike brought a kind of chaotic energy that you couldn't write if you tried. And Danny himself was the engine holding all of it together. Larger than life, deeply knowledgeable, and impossible to look away from. For a few years, it felt unstoppable. But behind the scenes, the strain was building in ways that never made it to air. Here's the part people forget. Count's Customs was a real, functioning business, not a studio set. Real customers, real deadlines, real money changing hands. And on top of managing all of that, Koker and his team were also filming a television show. The two things were happening simultaneously, and the pressure of trying to do both at the same level of quality every single day was enormous. Then the legal problem started. In 2014, just 2 years into the show's run, a Las Vegas couple, Jeanette and Paul Hurt, filed a $50,000 lawsuit against Count's Customs. They had brought in their 1967 Ford Mustang for a restoration, hoping it might even appear on the show. According to the lawsuit, no work was ever started by the promised date. The car was in worse shape than when it arrived, and when they asked for a refund, nothing came. The case outcome was never made fully public, but the damage to the shop's reputation was real. In a business built on trust, that kind of headline stings. That was only the beginning. A far more serious problem was developing inside the shop itself. An employee named Joseph Frontiera had been quietly helping himself to company funds. When Counts Customs eventually started finding irregularities in their accounts, they did a background check on Frontiera and discovered he had a prior history of embezzlement with a previous employer in Florida, something the hiring firm that recommended him had never disclosed. By the time the full picture emerged, Frontiera had used over $75,000 of the shop's money for personal expenses, a down payment on a Land Rover, airline tickets, personal purchases. He had even forged signature stamps of Danny Koker and Kevin Mack to authorize the transfers without their knowledge. The mess also triggered an IRS penalty of around $18,000 on top of everything else. Frontiera was charged with felony theft. The case was eventually settled in 2018, and he compensated the shop with around $41,000. But the financial drain, the stress, and the media attention that came with it took a toll that went far beyond the dollar amount. Here's where it gets interesting, because the internet decided to make this story far more dramatic than it actually was. Rumors started circulating that Ryan Evans, one of Danny's most trusted crew members, was the one who had stolen the money. It spread fast, the way misinformation always does. In reality, Ryan had nothing to do with it. Danny Koker himself addressed this directly in an interview, saying Ryan was like a brother to him, someone he had worked alongside for 25 years. The accusation was described as a horrible rumor that caused real damage to someone who didn't deserve it. But the internet wasn't done. Fake ads appeared online using Danny Koker's image to sell CBD products, making it look like he was personally endorsing some kind of online scheme. He wasn't. He'd never touched it. Then came the health rumors, claims he was battling serious illness. Then the jail rumors. In 2025, a YouTube video claiming Danny Koker had been sentenced to life in prison racked up over 400,000 views. Not a shred of truth to it. No criminal charges. No arrest. No conviction. Danny Koker has never spent a day in prison. He responded to this kind of thing the way someone who's genuinely exhausted by it would, calling it crazy and frustrating, pointing out that he's a conservative Christian who cares about family, faith, and the people around him. The contrast between who he actually is and who the internet decided to make him couldn't be sharper. People assumed that without the show, the whole operation would fade out. They were wrong. Counts Customs in Las Vegas is still fully operational. The museum is open to the public 7 days a week, free of charge. Custom builds are still coming through the shop. New projects are being posted. Danny Koker and his team attended SEMA in 2025, one of the biggest automotive events in the world, and they showed up with their full crew. Kevin Mack is still there. Ryan Evans is still painting. Shannon Akow is still building bikes. The shop that the show was built around didn't need the show to survive. Danny's band, Counts 77, a hard rock outfit rooted firmly in the 1970s, is still performing live. His charity work continues too. Earlier in 2025, his crew was in the middle of restoring a 1962 Cadillac for Steven Tyler's Janie's Fund charity auction. The year before, he donated a fully restored 1978 Lincoln Continental with 14,000 original miles that sold at auction for $300,000. The Counts' vamped rock bar and grill, which his wife Corey had run for years as a live music venue in Las Vegas, closed in June 2025, but even that was handled without drama. The building was listed, a buyer was found who wanted to continue running it as a live music space, and Koker moved on. And then there's this. As of late 2025, Danny Koker is reportedly in talks with 2 networks about 3 separate television concepts. He expected something to materialize by the end of the year. Whether that happens or not, the man clearly isn't finished with cameras. He just decided when he was finished with that particular one. The story of why Counting Cars ended is really the story of what happens when a real business meets a television production schedule and something has to give. Danny Koker built Counts Customs with his own hands long before any camera ever pointed at him, and it's still standing long after the cameras walked out the door. He took the blows, the lawsuits, the theft, the rumors, the misinformation, and he kept working. No dramatic exit, no meltdown, just a man who made a quiet decision to protect what mattered most and trusted that the work would speak for itself. It has, and if he does come back to television, you can be sure it'll be on his terms.